Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
I'll turn it over to you. You've got, I think, some more poll questions for us, but I'll leave everyone in your capable hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Simon. That was really interesting. What I'd like to do is to first talk about, in terms of the ED and I, to focus on the I in terms of the inclusion. What I find is quite often the inclusion aspect gets forgotten about in these discussions. And when I've got clients who are asking about putting in new initiatives, I ask them, what is the environment like at the moment for your staff? Um, are there any simple steps that you can do that, as and when you get a more diverse range of staff joining you, it's actually going to be a pleasant place for them to work? I think it's important to get the foundations right. Do you have an equality and dignity at work policy or prevention of harassment policy? Do you have such a policy in place? And for example, has it been circulated again during lockdown, for example? Has there been training on that? I think these foundations are really important um, before we look at some of the more sexy, interesting ways to improve it. Obviously, as a lawyer, I love getting the training out there because it does help limit your liability if there is harassment, but also it shows it is prevention. It means that for the current staff and for the staff that you want to recruit and retain, you're showing that you're preventing the issues. You're saying, well, this is not acceptable in terms of WhatsApps and jokes and questions and comments, but also you're taking reasonable steps. So if something happens, you can legitimately say, this is not a problem with the organisation. This was a bad apple. We had actually taken all reasonable steps to make sure that there wasn't this kind of behaviour to start off with. And one of the reasons I'm saying this is because I am getting so many queries and complaints from clients in terms of how to deal with harassment during lockdown. There's a survey in July of this year in which a third of women during lockdown were asked to put on more makeup or do their hair for Zoom calls. 27% of women during lockdown were asked to dress in a more sexy way. And 60% of those women did not raise that with their organisation. Issues are happening at the moment, and 60% of the workforce do not feel comfortable for whatever reason or don't know how to raise those issues to get them resolved. Also, I think the training is important because there is actually the line in the sand has moved monumentally over the last couple of years. We all have to adapt. We all have to learn the new language. We all need to feel comfortable when we are involved in recruiting and promoting different people and a diverse range of employees. And I think the training helps us give the tools, because quite often we have the good intentions, but we're just concerned as to how to do it appropriately. The next thing that I want to talk about, and I see again it was one of the questions that was discussed, is positive action versus positive discrimination. Now, positive action is allowed in the UK in certain circumstances. Positive discrimination is not. We cannot positively discriminate in relation to recruitment or promotion. There are limited examples where we are allowed to take positive action. Positive action, I help explain it because quite often we're all much more comfortable and used to taking positive action in relation to employees and applicants who may have disabilities. So we take positive action to help level the playing field up for them. So it is lawful for an employer to restrict an access to a training course to staff with disabilities, for example. With positive action, we can do it, and I'll talk you through the steps, but it's only allowed in certain circumstances, and there's no obligation to take positive action. But I suspect from the people that we've been talking to today and are interested in this, we probably are all interested to see what we can do within the law in terms of positive action. As an overview, you are allowed to you are allowed to take positive action to help recruit underrepresented or a disadvantaged group who have a protected characteristic, but only if there's a tie-break situation. And employers can take a proportionate measure, and it has to be time limited. So in terms of practical kind of examples, in terms of a general positive action, not in relation to recruitment, but general in terms of your staff, you can reserve places for training courses for people who have a particular protected characteristic, such as management, trying to get more people in management with who you have identified that you do not have sufficient people in that area, providing support or mentoring, work-based support groups for staff. That's very common and that's permitted. Providing prayer facilities for people at work to meet the needs of a particular religious minority, or providing free English language lessons to non-English speakers. So those are all kind of examples which are permitted. In terms of recruitment, we are allowed to make to set targets, but you cannot set quotas. That's a very important difference. You can also target advertising at particular disadvantaged groups. Look at sort of social media or hard copy media where people are more likely in that particular group to access. Things like making a statement in recruitment advertising, say that you welcome applications from a target group such as older workers. You can provide opportunities and access such as open days from schools and universities. One example I've come across which would be lawful, an employer has a policy of interviewing all disabled candidates who meet the minimum standards, job standards. Or if you are recruiting for a summer internship, you have 10 places available, and there's a tie break for the 10th person that you're going to allow in or to get to the second stage of recruitment. You can say that, well, actually, we're looking at BAME, our diversity of the workforce, and we're underrepresented in relation to BAME. So there's a tie break for the 10th place. We're going to give that to an equally qualified individual who is from an underrepresented group. So that would be lawful. All of these steps have to be time limited and proportionate. Unlawful discrimination would be things like you offer a job to a woman on the basis we don't have sufficient women, even though there's a male candidate who would be more qualified. You can't do that. Or again, if you decide that there's a part of a protected group that doesn't have sufficient representation in your workforce, and you say you're only going to interview women or BAME applicants for a particular role, you can't do that either. So that gives you a little bit of the overview in terms of the do's and don'ts and what you can do. In terms of case studies, things that I've come across which have been useful for employers, it's actually looking at Northern Ireland. I have to say, normally I look to the US when I'm looking for inspiration to see what has been done in terms of ED&I, and it's nice to be able to look slightly closer to home for this. But in Northern Ireland, they've been tackling their very particular issues with regards to diversity in the workforce. And for decades they've been doing this, and they've been doing this well. So there's codes that need to be looked at in Northern Ireland, and if these are not complied with, there's an inference of discrimination. And they are advised and recommended to use standard application forms rather than CVs to help compliance, to stop people asking or receiving information that's not actually relevant to the job. schools, age, other information. You can really limit it so you can get the specific information, as Simon was talking about. What do you actually need to find out about that job rather than getting people's CVs? Also, they have to ensure that the composition of the shortlisting and also the selection panel is fair and balanced. And that's something that is a small step, which does work. We've seen it work in Northern Ireland, and could make a really huge difference in terms of the people that you are able to recruit and attract to your role. Another case study is with Diageo, and I found this really interesting. So they've taken a huge step. They're well known for the work that they do in terms of ED&I. The big step is that they set a minimum global standard to have equalised parental leave in the majority of their offices. So that talks about having equal access for new fathers and mothers to paid leave. Obviously, that's a big, sexy change. It's challenging the cultural norms, and also it helps overcome a stereotype, and it shows that childcare and children aren't just a woman's issue. So if you had an unlimited checkbook, I think that would be an amazing thing to do. But there are smaller bite-sized steps, as Simon recommends. For example, how many of your new fathers are actually taking their full parental or paternity leave? Is this something that you're monitoring? Is it 100%? Why is it not 100%? What are the issues there? How many fathers are taking shared parental leave, if any? Is there a perception that this is a woman's job or it's frowned upon? Are the people from the top leading from example? Do you know that there's only 5% taking it at the moment? Do you have a plan in 5 years you want it to be 50% or 80%, to try to show that this is something that you're encouraging? So there are small steps that you can do to monitor and encourage, even if you don't have the luxury of being able to fund some of the big steps. Some of the key themes that I see from companies with robust ED&I policies: reverse mentoring. That's very popular. It does take time and effort and commitment, but it's not a huge financial resource. You do need to train people on doing that, but reverse mentoring has been very successful. Is there pro bono work that you can do to show that you're putting your money where your mouth is? Things that you can do to go out into the community and say that this is not something we're just paying lip service, we're actually dedicating our time and our skills. Employee networks are incredibly valuable. And also considering whether you can link up with external entities, competitors, other organizations, to discuss and compare notes. Something which, as I've said, I've really liked Simon's suggestion about other easy wins and simple steps. What about your bathroom facilities? Are there gender neutral loos in your organization? Is there a way that you can look at a potential issue and say, okay, well, what can we do today? Or when's the next refurbishment? What can we do to stop this issue, to make the organization more inclusive? And also to look at making your adverts more neutral. In the Independent, on the 22nd of June this year, Thames Water used an online tool that removed masculine coding in adverts after finding that only 8% of the sewage work technician applications were from women. They removed language such as competitive, confident, and champion. And this increased the applications from women from 8% to 46%. So look at your adverts, look at your website, look at your recruitment information to see if perhaps in a wider sense that it could be more inclusive to attract a more diverse website. And something which I think is really important is look at your monitor and consider internal targets. If you don't monitor something and have targets, things aren't going to change. And finally, I think, again, emphasizing something that Simon mentioned, As a business, we all have influence. We have influence in our personal sphere and influence when we all come together. And I think it's trying to look at how can we use our influence for good in terms of the people that we work with, the lawyers, the bankers, the recruitment consultants, the management consultants, our IT specialists. What do we ask of them, and how do we get them to show their commitment to improving in terms of ED&I?
Thanks very much, Caroline. That was really helpful, and you had some good practical tips there, which I really liked. So thank you for that. We've come to the end of our session. Before we close, I just wanted to ask all of you one final question. Answers in the chat, please. If there was one small thing that everyone could do when they leave the room today, what would it be? What would it be? What would that one small thing be to help progress the cause of ED&I in the workplace? Answers in the chat. I'll just go over the poll questions again. First question was, do you feel that your organization does enough to promote ED&I? The results were 65% yes, 35% no. Is ED&I an important factor when your company is awarding contracts? The results are, sorry, I'm just going to maximize. The results are 20% yes and 80% no. Next question, does your organization have an ED&I partner or senior equivalent on the board? 83% yes and 16% no. That's quite interesting. And then there were two more poll questions which were in the chat, which were, does your organization always ensure that there is a diverse interview panel? 23% said yes, and 76% said no. And then the last question, does your organization always ensure that there is a diverse interview pool? 14% said yes, and 85% said no. So that's all really interesting. That's it, I think. Thank you very much to Simon for sharing his insights with us. We all know that EDI is becoming more important, but we don't always know what to do about it. Your insights, Simon, have been really, really interesting, and your willingness to share them has really been very much appreciated. Thanks, everybody, for your participation in this webinar and for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us. I hope you found it enjoyable and interesting. We are going to be having future webinars, I think, for the time being, until we can get back around the table with a glass of wine. If there are any future topics that you would like to see, drop us a line. Robert Pinero will be in touch, and you can tell him if there are any topics you'd like to see covered. And we'd also appreciate any feedback that you might have about today's program. And that's it. Thank you very much, and goodbye. Thanks, everybody.